Any questions on the chart? All right, here's the top of the next page. Okay, so remember that in your trapezoid here, this is a mid-segment. I told you in the problem. And then that creates a trapezoid here and also a trapezoid here. So because the mid-segment is parallel to the bases, there will actually be 3 trapezoids there. What am I doing here? What is this? Meg? What? Pythagorean theorem. So remember, Pythagorean theorem goes leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. So the unknown goes wherever it belongs. This over here is always the hypotenuse squared. So if you know the hypotenuse, then your variable would be over here instead. Okay, but on this one, we don't know the length of the kite, the side of the kite. So 6 squared plus 5 squared equals that side squared. And then down here, I did 5 squared plus 8 squared equals that side squared. Okay, it's always leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. So anytime, what kind of triangle can you do the Pythagorean theorem on? Scott? Oh yeah, okay, Meg said right triangle. And you have to know 2 of the sides, right? It doesn't matter which 2 you know, but if you know 2 of the sides and a right triangle, you can use Pythagorean theorem to find the third one. Daniel? I typically will not ask you to round, but the instructions here said to round, so that's what it is. But I typically am going to ask you to leave your answers as simplified radicals, especially like the distance formula stuff. I want simplified radicals. Okay, on the kites where you don't have diagonals drawn in, sometimes students are compelled to go and draw in the diagonal and use the 2 triangles. But just remember that a kite has all the angles out to 360, and it has 2 congruent ones that would be joined by the long diagonal. So 2774 and 2 of these adds up to 360. You can certainly use the triangles, you just don't really need to do that. You can also draw a diagonal there if you want. Drawing in 2 diagonals makes things way too complicated. Okay, drawing in 1 diagonal is okay, but again, unnecessary because if that's 118, so is this one, then you just add them all up to 360. I think that we probably did problems 1 and 2 together. Does that sound right? Okay, then I'll just show you number 3. So as soon as you see that you don't have a pair of, that you have a pair of opposite sides that are not parallel, that tells you what? Johnson? Cannot be a parallelogram. It might still be a trapezoid though. Okay, so if you check the second pair of sides, if they were parallel, it'd be a trapezoid, but this doesn't have any parallel sides. That means it's not a parallelogram or trapezoid, but we aren't sure if it's a kite. You have to make sure that if it's not a parallelogram or trapezoid, that you actually check the definition of a kite. Okay, so I'm doing the distance formula on the sides, and AB and AD are congruent, they're both 5, and then BC and DC are congruent, they're both root 34. Daniel. A non-parallelogram that has perpendicular diagonals does not have to be a kite. So perpendicular diagonals does not necessarily tell you it's a kite. For kites, you really do have to do distance 4 times, unfortunately. Unless it's not a kite, in which case you might get away with doing fewer distances. Okay, the last one, it's not a parallelogram or trapezoid, but it's also not a kite. So A, B, and B, C are congruent. The other 2 are not. Okay, so that's just a generic quadrilateral.